Welcome, and thank you for your time today. The big question we all need to ask ourselves is, why should we care about wasted resources, and what simple things can we all do to take action now and make a difference in the future? Well, let me help you to understand about the impacts of waste and the urgency to cut it out. This statement is chilling as well as an undeniable truth. We are the first generation to know that we are destroying the planet, and we are the last to do anything about it. The reason we know we are destroying the planet is because our scientists have been telling us for years that global warming is a direct result of overproduction and consumption. Since 2015 and the Paris Agreement, a legally binding international treaty on climate change committed us to reducing global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees C by 2030 when compared to pre-industrial levels. The way that this could work is through economic and social transformations, and not just by measuring GDP. So, do you think we need legislation, or will we be inclined to just get on with it? Well, I'm afraid it's my belief that it's a basic guide that promotes standards, rules on how to undertake business whilst ensuring there is a level playing field, and it is the backbone of democracy. But even if the legislation is not quite with us because of the endless consultations that we have, this is no reason to do nothing if we know in our hearts that it is the right thing to do, and to act now while we can. If we carry on business as usual, the world as we know it will be unrecognizable. Extreme weather events are strong indicators of how bad things will get. With the loss of coral reefs at 2 degrees, mass climate migration, loss of crops, clean water scarcity, rising sea levels, the devastation is palpable. What sort of a legacy are we leaving our children? So, to bring us back to Earth, and our Earth back to us hopefully, something that every business in the UK is legally obliged to do is fulfil their duty to apply the waste hierarchy. At worst, if you do not take all reasonable measures, this could be a criminal offence. However, it does not need to get to that if you work closely with your waste management provider and start to reassess what you are doing today and what you need to do going forwards. When you tick the box to state that you or your organisation has fulfilled your duty to apply the waste hierarchy, are you confident that it's a truthful statement, and that your waste will not be appearing in a foreign country or indeed fly tipped closer to home? This is how your brand's image can be severely affected, along with the trust of your stakeholders and consumers potentially being lost. So, the starting point for any waste review is to determine where your organisation sits within the waste hierarchy. This is a priority order that ranks waste options according to what is best for the environment, as well as its financial impact. The higher up the hierarchy a material goes, the cheaper it is to handle, and you may get a rebate for higher quality recyclable materials. But the terminology can sometimes be quite confusing, so let's take a closer look. Synonyms for recycle include reuse, reclaim, recover, or reprocess. But on this inverted pyramid, the hierarchy distinguishes between these stages, with the most detrimental being at the bottom and the best option at the top being prevention. But to make things harder, there are qualifying criteria that determine where the wasted resources sits within these two options. This is where standards, best practices, and a detailed knowledge of your waste plays a big part in getting the best outcome for you and the planet. What we also know about the waste hierarchy is it guides us on how to limit CO2 emissions, be resource efficient, and has cost reductions built in at the same time. This will ultimately save us money, make us circular, and help us to achieve 1.5 degrees C. So what is it that you can do right now? Well, all of us at home and at work need to achieve this 1.5 degrees C in all that we do. Did you know that a third of the food produced in the UK is thrown away? If we all did our little bit, for example, and used reusables as opposed to single-use items, if we minimised our energy use and our water consumption, this would mean we have a chance of achieving peak CO2 by the deadline of 2025. As a result of this, extreme weather issues will not get worse, our oceans will start to heal and replenish themselves, our atmosphere will be healthier and less polluted. So, we all must learn to do more with less. But do you know where you can find the answers from within your data? You probably have some obstacles in the way, such as too much data that needs to be simplified. Is your organization too large or disjointed to get this clear picture that we need? There is no one team, perhaps, that seems to deal with all the issues together. And there isn't one person looking at continuous improvements across the whole organization. We need to analyze and question our data to reveal what it is telling us. This in turn will convert our learned knowledge into wisdom and then into action. We each need to measure our performance. If we start by baselining where we are in terms of wasted resources, we can see how far we have to go to get to the legally binding 1.5 degrees C. If we compare the information on a regional, national or global perspective, we can prioritize our efforts through a decarbonisation strategy. We can then share these best practices within our own business or with others through collaboration. This will ultimately help us to achieve the desired peak CO2 by 2025. And just to be clear, peak CO2 means the maximum amount of carbon dioxide being placed into the atmosphere is balanced by carbon sequestration mechanisms. Here we have some anonymous data that represents the actual performance of an organisation in 2021. In the bottom right, we have some typical waste management data that shows 66% of the waste was recycled, 31% was recovered in energy from waste, and 2.5% was sent to landfill. This information has been normalized in the top right image as a dial. The tachometer represents the organization's performance with regards to the zero waste index shown as 28.2%. This roughly translates into a 1.7 degree trajectory. This summary figure is made up from 27 different sites shown on the bar graph on the left of the screen. What you will notice is that half of the sites have a zero waste index that is positive, and the other half are negative. The reason they are negative is because the proportion of bad waste is higher than the good waste. The bad waste here is non-renewable and will be sent to energy from waste plants or landfill. So if we convert the bad into good waste, we will increase the level of recycling, possibly minimize unnecessary waste being produced, and in turn increase the zero waste index performance towards this 1.5 degrees C or lower that we have to get. The interesting relationship shown in the central graph is that when zero waste index shown in the light blue line is high, the costs are low, shown by the dark blue line, therefore supporting the argument that promoting waste up the hierarchy saves money as well as reduces CO2 emissions. This is the same information but displayed as a heat map and shows the geographical relationship of different sites by location, where the size of the bubble relates to the volume of waste. And the colour of the bubble shows the performance of the site in relation to the zero waste index that I just talked about in the dial, and hence its individual trajectory towards 1.5 degrees C as a visual guide. This knowledge is really useful to identify where we need to focus on when prioritising our waste reduction efforts. So, starting on the journey of action, the circular economy is a cyclical model of production and consumption, which involves sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, and recycling existing materials and products as long as possible. The 5 steps to circularity process shows the stages that an organization should go through to minimize resource usage. Starting with the data appraisal and assessment, interrogating where the waste has come from and, importantly, why it was generated in the first place. The findings from the review must then be communicated to the engineers or operatives or even cleaning staff to try and rectify why the wastage was occurring in the first place. If the problems come from further up the supply chain, this should then be discussed with the procurement teams and supply chain managers to develop alternative solutions in the future. The simplest examples to start the process off could be the eradication of single-trip pallets or the use of polystyrene packaging. This is how you can turn your data into action and innovate your process to become more circular. So, the reason why we need to be on top of our wasted resources is to ultimately reduce carbon dioxide emissions. The way we can do this is to measure and monitor our baseline. We are the first and last generation that can do something about it. We must analyze the data to look for future opportunities. We must curb our desire to overconsume and learn to do more with less. We cannot afford to exceed peak CO2 after 2025, as extreme weather will become more regular. And please, remember, if you're not doing it for yourself, then please do it for future generations. Thank you for your time.